Super happy to see you, and thank you for making the time to sit down with me. And hopefully we can share some value, share some stories, and even if one person gets something out of it, that's what it's about.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, I like to start off by just giving you thanks and praise for being someone who's very influential positively, and being a good friend and a good brother and a running mate. So in this game of life, you're one of those people that I really appreciate and really look up to, and and really look forward to doing some amazing things together.
Absolutely, and right back at you.
Yeah. So, can you remember the first time we saw each other or we met each other?
Yeah, I think it had to have been at Sheepdog CrossFit.
Yeah.
Right, years and years ago, and I think you were visiting, so you weren't sort of signed up yet or anything.
Yeah.
I think it might have been with Krista or
Yep.
Something, and calling friends, and essentially, it all went from there. Like, you joined the gym after, and I had the pleasure of coaching you, watching you, turn into the beast that you turned into, and yeah, that's as far as I remember it.
Yes, well, I remember it vividly, and maybe it's in and around 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
That's we first met, and I believe you're gym owner with Rob, and I came up to that Savage class at 4:45 in the morning. Yeah, in the morning, I think if I look back, some of my best memories, it was a 3-year kind of solid period where that was my slot, and some of the best times were that, and I was in my mid to late 30s, and probably in the best shape of my life at that time, and I'm starting to make my health a priority again. And it's like we only have one place to live in this body, so we've got to take care of it, right? And this podcast is called The Power of Today,
Mm-hmm.
and it's based off of a book that I've written, and you're actually in the book. And I remember this saying that I've told this to you in the past, but it was like 2 or 3 weeks in. And every single day that I would work out, the next day I couldn't walk. And it was like, what the heck, And I asked you, Seb, like, when does this stop? Like, when will I feel whole or better again, And you had mentioned to me, if you're doing it properly, it's gonna suck every single day. But do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Well, I've said it lots, but
Yeah.
I remember vividly this conversation with you.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. If you're somebody that's pursuing growth in everything you do, including your workout regimens, you're gonna get better. You're gonna get comfortable at the level you're at, and then you're gonna seek discomfort so that you can grow. So when does this stop? When it stops, when you stop seeking to be better.
Yes.
And you're just happy with the status quo,
What is that? Like, what is it with us humans that seek this and revere and look after or look towards comfort so much?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell any stories in your personally or
Well, yeah. There's a lot of neuroscience and there's a lot of psychology behind that, but ultimately we're wired for survival.
Yeah.
That's what we're wired for.
Right.
And so everything that makes us uncomfortable, even slightly uncomfortable, gets magnified by the brain.
Right.
Because the brain is like, wait a minute, you weren't uncomfortable 5 minutes ago. Where are you now?
Right.
Something must be deadly.
Right.
And so the body's an extremely conservative machine. That's what the problem is. And that's what the problem is with staying in the comfort zone, is that when the body gives you the alarm bells as far as your life is in danger, really your life is not in danger until here. So you're missing the opportunity for growth within this entire range here. Right. And so because we're survival machines, we need to learn to override some of the basic mechanisms that we have. And a lot of those decisions are decisions, like you are making a decision to take a step in the uncomfortable. But once you do that, there's a physiological change, not only psychological changes that occur because you're building confidence and you know where you stand in space and time in relation to others.
Right.
It lessens the stress on your central nervous system, but it also allows you to do things that are increasingly more difficult, right?
Right.
And so that's why it's a critical piece of growth, but it's also terrifying.
Yeah, I love this. And we're going to go so much because like the second half of the interview, we go into the contents of the book and kind of what they mean to you.
Sure.
But I love to tell, everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
I have a story, you have a story. Like, how did you grow up? Like, who were you as a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of the dreams that you had or maybe the insecurities that you might have had?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember yourself as a kid?
Yeah, so there has been quite a bit of trauma in my youth. So there's a lot of some periods of time where I don't remember most things.
Right.
But I do remember, vividly growing up. So my mom was a 15-year-old when she had me.
Wow.
So that was very young, and she was a single mom. And I recall us having a closeness of relationship on account of essentially having each other.
Yes.
That's all we had.
Yes.
She didn't have anybody else. There was no man or male figure involved. I didn't have, my dad was never in the picture, so I've never seen him, never met him, never seen pictures of him.
Right.
And so, growing with a single mom that was in her own right, a baby really, she was going through the growing pains of becoming an adult, like a responsible adult herself. And so for the first 5 or 6 years, we were kind of working this growing up together,
Right.
Right. With a 15-year difference between the two of us. And what I remember vividly is I had a good heart on me. All I wanted was to help people. It didn't matter how. I always wanted to be there to help somehow. I was very responsible. I would go, by the time I was 9, I had 2 siblings, I had 2 sisters.
Yeah.
I would, grocery shop in downtown Montreal on the subway, come back and cook, like those types of things from a very early age, like between 9 and 11 type deal, So responsibilized very quickly. And mom had to work 3 jobs to make ends meet, that kind of stuff. So I was really picking up some of the slack that was going on with that. And, eventually, so my sisters were living with their dad, but they would, kind of visit, that kind of stuff. But eventually, there was a family situation with my sisters and their dad, and they had to come live with us. So now the dynamics kind of changed. And by that time, I was 11, I think, or 12. And so now the dynamic changed a little bit. But mom and she started pursuing, psychology degree later in life to eventually become a therapist. And her favorite pastime was to have conversations with me.
Wow.
Wow. And she never spoke to me like baby talk, or she never spoke to me like she spoke to somebody that was 9. She spoke to me like an adult all the time. And she took pride in that. She was like, no, I won't do the baby talk, and I won't do the dumbing down things, and like you're gonna grow into these conversations. And so I became, I would say, very, very in tune, but I became very interested in conversations.
Oh.
And so, a big part of our relationship was the time that we spent having amazing conversations. So no money, no real glam, so to speak, right? But just very visceral, very wheels to the pavement conversations with mom. And she would wake me up at night, at school in the morning, whatever. She'd come back from a shift late. She hadn't seen me all day. She would come in my room, see if I was awake.
Right.
If I woke up, we'd go on the couch and have an hour-long conversation about whatever.
Wow, what an amazing time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're very well spoken,
Mm-hmm.
and to be well spoken, you have to have a certain critical thinking skill set. You think those formative years when you were having those conversations, like, did that create a hunger within you or the skill set to be able to do what you do today?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it has. I mean, it literally lit the fire.
Wow.
You know, the fire under me to have the critical conversations, to embrace discourse, respectful discourse,
Right.
and have conversations about this, that, and the other thing, so that we may elevate our way of thinking. So this was not just about me elevating others, but for others to elevate me through the conversation. So, you know, a lot of the times when I'm on a podcast or having a conversation with somebody or even teaching, midway through the conversation, I've changed my mind about something, you know,
Right.
because I've developed my thought process further. So I think that it's highly underrated, and I do believe that people tend to take the comfortable route, which is I'm going to dig my heels in here, treat their knowledge with a lot of dogma, and think that whatever it is that they are buying into is the end all be all, that there's no other options. And I think part of it is laziness, is intellectual laziness, right? Like, because it's difficult to consistently look at the two sides of a coin, or to, you know, kind of try to develop the way you're processing information, so that we may get better at it, because it's the pursuit of excellence never stops. It continues in the conversation range as well as any other sort of areas of our lives.
Totally agree. Well, I think many people, like, you're very, very active on social media,
Mm-hmm.
and you have your tribe or loyal following of people. But I think we should speak a little bit towards what you did as a profession
Mm-hmm.
before you retired.
Yeah.
I think people want to know.
Do they though?
People want to know.
Yeah. So, you know, as a youth, and I think it just starting from my youth, just to add a little bit of context, is probably important. But as I said earlier, I always had the incline to want to help others, and also there was a long period of time where I was heavily bullied, and eventually, two things arise out of that. You either become somebody that bullies, or you become somebody that protects others against it.
Right.
And I took that path. And it was a willful decision for me to go down the path of interfering with bullying in a way that nobody had for me.
Right.
And the avenue that I sought to do that was policing for me.
Mm.
And to set a little bit of context, this was in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. In the mid-90s, there was a waging war between two motorized organized crime groups, the Hells Angels and the Rock Machines, and it was very serious.
Right.
You know, military weapons-grade weaponry being used, and people getting killed left, right, and center, and it was a very, very tumultuous time for the province and for some of the city centers that we were in.
Sure.
And I came back from a school trip one day, and I was in the bus with Mom, and I saw Wolverine, which is a very aggressive unit of the Montreal Police. That was actually a combined unit. Had all these bikers on the ground, you know, handcuffed behind their backs and waiting to be picked up by the wagon, by the prisoner wagon. Sure. And I asked my mom, who are these guys? And I could see, you know, their balaclavas, and they had, you know, weapons and all this stuff. So I asked them who they were, and she said, this is, you know, a tactical unit. These guys aren't scared of anything. I said, well, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And she said, well, get your work done. Roll your sleeves up, and get your work done. And so that set into motion sort of a very, I would say, a singular focus towards the pursuit of that goal, which, of course, eventually in my teenage years kind of got a little bit blurry, right? So there were some bifurcations from the path, so to speak. But at the end of the day, at 17 or 18 years old, I joined the military with wanting to go to policing. So this was a bit of a stepping stone for me to go to policing, so I could get some skills that I may use in the tactical world eventually, because ultimately that's the goal that I had. And so I went that route. I stayed with the military for 3 years, and I kind of didn't expect to love the military as much as I did. And I really enjoyed it. And I left the military in 2000. In 2000, went to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I went to training in 2001. Never looked back. So I spent 20 years in policing. 12 of those years in tactical unit. 7 of those years as a team leader on a tactical unit. And I eventually retired as the Sergeant Major for British Columbia. So that was, a position that I could have never foreseen or anticipated.
Sure.
There's only one person in that rank in the entire province, and if you were trying to do that, it probably wouldn't work.
Right.
I think there was a lot of luck involved in there as well. So, but I ended up making a decision to retire after 20 years in policing to do something else, because life is about the adventure.
Right.
And I don't want to spend 60 years doing the same thing. Like if there are opportunities to do other things and experience life in a different lens,
right,
or view it through a different lens, I should say.
Wow. I told a small group of people, but I mostly told it to myself when I first met you, because you're a beast, you're a savage, not only physically but mentally. I think that's where it all comes from. Mm-hmm. This savage mindset, being strong, resilient. Stoic, but I always told myself and a few people that would listen, I'm so glad that you're on this side of the law. Because I could see you on the other side of the law be very intimidating. Mm-hmm. But I see that, and you have strength, you have power, you're very well spoken, you're smart, but then you choose to restrain that and use that skill set to serve people. So I always said, I am so glad that Seb is on this side of the law, not the other side, because I could see him running after me, mm-hmm. and I'd be running the other way as far as possible. For me, we can get together and we can have conversations about a lot of the victories and puff up a lot of the stuff that we've done, and that's all fine. But, I'm more interested in the struggle, mm-hmm. Because I believe that humans are really capable. The potential is far beyond what they give themselves credit for, or even dare to dream about. I want to go a little bit into some of your health conditions that you went through over the last, I think it's well documented, and the people who are close to you know.
Absolutely.
But from your point of view, what did you go through, and I'm pretty sure you're still struggling. Mm-hmm. You're still going through it. It's not all there yet. And you still haven't. But what did that process do to you, as physically, mentally, spiritually? Like what? Can you share a little bit about that struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, adversity has been a part of my life since before I was born, even.
Right.
And so I had an adversity-ridden life, and at a very young age, I decided that it was quite clear to me that adversity was never going away in life.
Right.
So a lot of people are walking around wanting to avoid being hurt. Mm. When I was embracing the challenge of overcoming whatever was attempting to hurt me. Not that something was focused on hurting me, but that's sometimes a perception that we have as we're negotiating life's adversity. And so for me, from a very young age, every time something happened, it was head on. Head on right into it, and let's deal with whatever comes out of that. And I knew that regardless of how difficult it would get, on the other end, I would be a different person, a stronger person.
Sure.
Not everybody necessarily works that way.
Yeah.
There's some luck as well involved in that, because how much adversity you were exposed to ain't up to you.
Yeah.
Really,
it
right?
Is,
And so there's, life does things in mysterious ways, but I would say that this prepared me very well for the hurdles, the medical hurdles. So what ended up happening, just so everybody's kind of clear on what the condition is, I had a surgery on my left lower leg, and the surgery triggered compartment syndrome,
right,
which is a condition where the muscle starts blowing up, swelling, and eventually exceeds the capacity of the fascia, which is the protective pouch that muscles are in. Otherwise, they'd be flying around loose.
Sure.
And when it happens, it puts a lot of pressure on the nerves. It puts a lot of pressure on the blood vessels, and it eventually cut the blood supply to my calf muscle on the left side. And I have a pretty good pain threshold, so I thought that this was normal pain associated with surgery. Of course, it wasn't. It was a lot more pain than I should have been experiencing. And we found out 26 hours later that for the last 26 hours, there hasn't been any blood going to my calf muscle. Right? And that's a wrap. Your muscle is necroted and dead.
Yeah.
And so they essentially perform a fasciotomy, which is opening the skin on both sides and the fascia on both sides so that the muscle can ooze out. And they did that successfully, but then they took a little prod stick and they attempted to get a reaction on my calf muscle. And of course that wasn't happening because the calf was dead. And so a lot of people don't know this, but on the muscles, you can have a dead surface and 2 layers below the muscle may be healthy. So they had to do a debridement or debridements, as it were. 9 surgeries I had between, it happened in August and October. So within the 2-month period, I had 9 surgeries on that leg to remove additional layers of muscles, which ultimately left me with about 15% muscle mass in my left calf in comparison to my right calf.
Yes.
Now, there was a lot of other things that happen, such as when the muscle is degrading or when the muscle is dying inside your body, it causes issues. And one of the telltale sign of that is an elevated creatine kinase level, and CK as they refer to. And I believe that the average is about 150 to 200 UL per milliliter of blood, and I was at 40,000, which is in dialysis range. It's in kidney failure range, and that's the risk that rhabdomyolysis pauses is on the kidneys. And so, there was a time there where we didn't know if I was going to make it, and I was offered an opportunity to contemplate that and to make a decision, and I made the decision to call my girls and have a conversation. I have 2 daughters, teenagers, and I had a conversation with them saying, hey, Dad's probably not coming home. Life has had other plans for me, and I'm sorry, I wish I could be there, and all this stuff. So I had that conversation with them on account of thinking that this definitely was the end. And again, I was still there the next day, so I called them back and said, I'm still here, levels are still high, and eventually to the doctor's dismay, it started going down substantially, and I eventually would recover from that.
Yes.
But the most important piece of this was that there was no kidney damage for me, so they were really curious as to what I was doing that allowed me to be so creatine kinase resistant. And I had done CrossFit for many, many, many years, and we know that it takes a massive toll on and generally CrossFitters will have elevated levels of creatine kinase, so it is very likely that CrossFit did a lot more for me than just get me in shape over the years. It probably saved my life. And so, fast forward to coming back here, of course, they sent me home. Like the entire time I was in the hospital, I was on self-administrators for opiates. And every 5 minutes, I would take 0.02 milligram every 5 minutes for 28 days. Right. So I was not in a good place. If you've ever been on opiates, because you had to, but it makes everything very dark. Everything, your mindset, your thought process, the way you process information, it can make it very dark. So. And so what happened was, so now they take me and they go, okay, you go home, and they give me 400 pills to bring along for the ride, and I'm by myself at home, and so the first couple weeks, my leg was still open, I was still experiencing a ton of pain, and I would self-medicate, but very reasonably, no issues whatsoever, but eventually the leg was closed back, and I'm like, okay, time to get off those opiates, and the medical system isn't set up in a way that is conducive to have somebody help you taper off and do all this good stuff the way it should be done. So it's really difficult. That's one of the pieces associated with prescribing opiates so much. There's no ability to sustain helping everybody get off the opiates as well.
Right.
So I ended up going cold turkey, which is extremely dangerous. I do not recommend it. Do not do that. It's very dangerous. I went cold turkey, and for about 17 weeks I had incredible night sweats. And we're talking, I would wake up like if you took me straight out of the bat and brought me in the bed kind of deal. I would change 5 times a night, those types of things. So eventually got over the opiate withdrawal, and all was well. Aside from now, the neurological rewiring, everything in my leg was creating a ton of issues. So now it was all neurological issues I was experiencing every day. And to this day, it continues to be, at the current time, my leg is not doing well. It's getting amputated. That's been confirmed a couple weeks ago. So my lower left leg will get amputated mid-shin. That ship has sailed for me. I was okay with that in October or in August of the year that this happened in 2021. I'd already made that decision and asked, can I make this happen? And of course they wouldn't let me, because they wanted to give it full recovery time, and I appreciate them for doing that, because they held me back from myself, protected me from myself, and that this could have turned differently, and it could have been a much better recovery with much better functionality rate, but it didn't. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm faced with the prospect of this is getting taken off.
Well, thanks for sharing. I mean, while you were sharing, I could feel my body tense up and grab the handles, because it's kind of like reliving that, those moments. And I remember texting you and seeing your updates on social media, and then following, we had a few conversations where we met up, and then you shared the story, and just wow. Just to go a little bit more into you said, I'm trying to understand, because I haven't gone through that type of adversity physically yet. I don't think you would wish that on anyone, but thus is life. It happens sometimes. So I definitely can feel the emotions attached to what you were going through, but I can't say I can relate to any of that yet. But let's just like you said a few weeks ago, the decision was made to amputate, and you say that you're still okay with that, but I don't think. When you physically have to do it, what are some of the emotions and thoughts going through your brain, kind of that you're dealing with? Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because it hasn't happened yet.
Yes,
is the real answer. However, for me, so the way I run the program, I call life the program, because this is my program, right? So in my program, what I try to do is I will allow myself a certain amount of time to feel, right? Feel what something feels like. If I'm sad, if I'm frustrated, if I'm angry, if I'm whatever the emotions are. I will give myself a little bit of time, generally a short period of time, where all bets are off. Right. I can self-pity, I can do all the stuff that people love to do. Yeah. But as soon as that day is done, or that half a day, or that whatever, how many hours, then it's go time. Right. Then it's work. What are we doing? And now it becomes a mathematical equation. It becomes numbers, and it becomes I'm very stoic about that. So I separate the two kind of deal. And I'm at that point now where all the grieving or everything that I could associate with losing this leg was done. Mostly. It was preloaded. It was front-loaded, as I like to call it. Yeah. And I made peace with the prospect. And I visualized the prospect. And I visualize how it's going to feel. I visualize the day of. I visualize the day after. I visualize the challenges associated with it. All of those things. But not just in a unidimensional sort of visualization process. I've closed my eyes. I've smelt it. I've listened to it, I've felt it,
Mm.
because it's important. And I think when people visualize, as the word implies, they generally visualize, like as this is what this is going to look like with their eyes. And so we're tapping into one sense. And then when reality hits, that visualization doesn't necessarily translate or carry over very well because all the other emotions associated to our other senses were never tapped into.
Right.
And so for me, I made a point of visualizing in a multifaceted way so that I could prepare myself for whatever is coming.
Right.
And also understanding that there's only so much control I have over what's coming. So all the stuff I've been visualizing could be completely off.
Right.
And something completely out of left field could come. But failing to have a plan is the worst plan.
Right. Right.
And so for me, it was all about front loading the emotional burden associated with the loss of my leg and turn it into a bit of excitement. I haven't sprinted in 2 years. I love to sprint. I can't wait to have a prosthetic that allows me to sprint. Hey, I'm a master's athlete. I love to train hard. Maybe the Special Olympics.
Right.
Maybe I go sprinting there because I was pushing numbers that were, conducive to it.
Right.
So I can likely do it. And so now I started turning this prospect into what are the positives that I hope to achieve as I'm moving forward through this journey. And one of those things is I want to go to Iceland and hike everywhere with my new prosthetic.
Right.
As a test of myself, of my grit, of my determination, but also of my physical abilities in relation to this new condition. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. Now I have to change my game because one of my legs will be,
Sure.
won't be there.
Yeah.
So I won't be able to use it as much as I used to in the context of my jiu-jitsu. All of those things. So all of those things to me are now exciting. So those are things that I look forward to. So yeah, I can stay here in the basement, turn the lights off and close the blinds and stay there and stew. But it's not helping and it's not serving the greater purpose, which is for me to have some enjoyment in this life called, in this journey called the program.
Right.
So,
wow. I mean, I'm real time. I'm just taking that, what you've said, and like how you're approaching life and adversity and trying to put a spin on it and even create a little bit of excitement. That's really savage. I mean, in terms of what you're about, savage mindset and who you are as a person. Yeah, I'm inspired and motivated, even within my own life. I want to, before we go into some of the practical part of the interview, I want to touch upon your new puppy.
Yeah. Oh God, you've unleashed something here.
Because I mean, I almost see what's his
Achilles.
name? Achilles.
Yeah.
Yeah, Achilles as an extension of who you are.
It's funny because everybody says that.
Yeah. So I mean, what made you want to get can you tell me a little bit about the breed and the process and what you're trying to do with Achilles? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Achilles is a Belgian Malinois. Okay. He's a very rare color of Belgian Malinois, which is a black and fawn. Mm-hmm. So most of them are kind of brownish with the black face. Yeah. He's more black and he has that gold undercoat.
Yeah.
He's a beauty. But Achilles and the Belgian Malinois in general are work dogs. They're working dogs. They're used extensively in special forces. They're used extensively in police work for their grit, their determination, their intensity, their speed. Their size is very conducive to be carried in and out of choppers and rappelling down on the side of vessels and all this good stuff. So they're a breed that's heavily favored for that kind of work. And of course, I spent so many of my prime years in the tactical field that this was always something that I was looking to do: get a work dog and put him to work. Right. Even though theoretically it is in an operational setting because I'm no longer active. It's still, the dog has a job. Right. And they need a job. Those dogs need a job because if they don't have a job and they get intellectually bored, you can kiss your house goodbye. So is everything else because they tend to have a destructive type behavior if their energy isn't channeled properly. And I love that about him. He has an intensity that's unmatched. right? And I believe I've been accused of that before as well. So
Right.
we just see eye to eye on that process, and we're very, very tight. But what ended up happening with him was initially it was supposed to be a protection dog,
Yes.
and I don't know that he has all the protection propensities. And one of those things is that he's just very social, right? Like he just loves people and that kind of. And we did a lot of socialization with him and everything, because that's a critical piece of that. But I didn't know if his temperament was, and in fact, I didn't know if I wanted it.
Yeah.
Because now I have this dog, which also is a family dog.
Yes.
And I want to do things with other people, with my friends, go on hikes, those types of things. And if you have a very, very well-trained protection dog, there's going to have to be some limitations as to who he hangs out with and who gives him rewards, such as petting him and those types of behaviors. And so I decided to make him an adventure dog instead, which has turned out to be probably the best decision that I made in relation to him and his training. And so an adventure dog, what does that mean? Well, it means that even if he's afraid of something, he will go and do the thing and work it out, right? As you saw in one of my latest videos when we did the cave exploration, and him and I are in the prone position with the cave on top of my shoulder blades, and we're crawling through this long tunnel to get into an open cave, and Achilles is whining, but he's moving forward, right? Whereas we have another dog who's a Rottweiler, love her, but there is no way anywhere near that cave, and she would have been running, 100 miles in the other direction. So it's important. But he also can climb. He can climb ladders. He can jump off obstacles. So if I get him off somewhere and he needs to be rescued, I can just tap on my chest and he jumps on me. Those types of things. So we've made him. He can walk on beams and balance and do all this stuff. So he's a really cool dog. Even wet beams, as I found out recently. So I wanted in this journey, in the program, I wanted my canine friend, to be with me every step of the way.
Amazing.
If I go travel, he's coming. If I go do X, Y, and Z, he's coming. And when I explore life, and I explore these various locations in nature and everything, that he gets to connect with me and with nature as well.
Right. And
that was the goal in having him. And that's what we've been doing with him.
Adventure dog.
Yeah,
amazing. He's such a beast, but also such a baby.
Yeah.
He's quite amazing, and you found each other.
We found each
other. Yeah, and I love the content that you're putting out, and he almost has his own personality.
He does. Oh, he does.
Well, this is the part where we go through the letters of the power of today, which is time, opportunity, development, assessment, and yield.
Yeah.
And so, this is Seb and Jay, and this is also Savage Mindset collaborating with Power of Today. So for you, for me, I treat time as sacred, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And I love life, even the challenging parts, the stressful parts, I love life. But I'm not so, what would you call it? I'm not so naive to think I'm invincible. We've seen fires, we take lives lately. We've seen accidents. We've seen, whether it's natural causes, natural disasters, accidents or whatnot. We're finite, and a car accident can take a life. Something within cancer, we've seen it within people that have passed away way too early. How do you treat time? How do you treat, even in light with, saying, possibly goodbye to your daughters, and that emotion, and wrestling with the fact that you could pass away, with the conditions that you had in your body, but then also turning it around and taking adversity and making the best out of it. What's your definition? What's your mindset of time?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a great question. And It wasn't always so, right? Like sometimes it takes a bit of wisdom, and it takes years to develop that through a process of patternization called life, you know. And that's why most people that come to those realizations are generally in their 40s, you know, at 40s and 50s and 60s, where people really realize how truly valuable time is.
Right.
But for me, if there is one thing that really helped me negotiate the challenges of time, it's been my acceptance of death in the face of what I had to do for a living.
Yes.
Right? So I was exposed to death a lot more than the average person. In fact, the average person can put their head in the sand, so to speak, and not worry about death whatsoever for decades.
Right.
Right? Without having it hit near, or without risking the prospect themselves, or whatever the case may be. But in my world, this was a daily operation.
Right.
And every time I made some tactical decisions, and every time I made some, as an operator on the team, every time I entered a residence where somebody had the potential to want to harm me, it was a prospect I had to face every single time when I put my life on the line during a hostage taking or whatever the case may be. I was very aware of the possibility of losing my life in the application of that purpose.
Right.
But this is what is critically important, is it was attached to a purpose. But eventually it removed my fear of death completely.
Right.
It removed it. It replaced it with an understanding that death is a part of life,
right.
not the end of it.
Yeah.
And we treat it like it's the end of life. No, you were always meant to die. Right. There is no ifs or buts. And in fact, it's probably one of the concepts that's the most fair.
Yeah.
You know, because it doesn't matter what social demographic you come from. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are. None of that matters.
None of it matters.
There's one consistent end to this journey, right? So the question does not become, what is the end of that journey going to be like for me? But rather, what am I going to do with the time that I have? Factoring that we don't know how much time we have, right? And so this is kind of the way I look at it, and this is kind of the way I like people to contemplate time. Imagine that you're working for somebody and you're receiving, say, $75 an hour. Right? So that person gives you, or that organization gives you $75, and you give them an hour of your time you'll never get back.
Sure.
Now take that hour, the same hour, and put it at the end of your life. And that hour is an hour of conversation with your kids before you passed away.
Sure.
How much is that hour worth?
Priceless, almost. Yeah.
There is no value.
Yeah.
There is no value to that hour.
Yeah.
But yet we go through life treating it like an exchange, like a gifts exchange. But it's not just about the $75 an hour, because we do have to work so that we can make ends meet and we can live and we can feed ourselves and our kids. So I understand that. It's everything else we do that takes away.
Right.
You know, the Netflix, the sitting there procrastinating, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do this tomorrow, I'll do this the other day. Like, you don't know if you have time, but more importantly, you need to be using it wisely. You need to move. You don't have time to sit around.
Right.
You know? And so for me, it's all about what actionable items do I have on the go, and am I moving forward right now? And if I don't move forward today, why? Why haven't I moved forward in a certain context, right? Whatever that might be. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's something I want to do, maybe it's a trip I want to plan. And so I really treat life and time as if every minute I have on this planet is my last one right now. That's how I view things. I try to connect with things, with humans, but also with the things that we take for granted. Mm-hmm. Drinking water, you know, trees, the sun. The ball of water we're floating on at astronomical speed around an orbit, which is completely mind-boggling. You know, all the things that we take for granted. I try to connect with those things. Mm-hmm. So when I'm drinking lemon water and I feel sort of the pulp go through my throat and all this stuff, I experience an incredible amount of gratitude for being able to do that right now. But gratitude is a choice. It's not an accident. You need to call yourself to task. And if you've forgotten how you've taken something for granted, you need to reteach yourself how to not take it for granted. Even if that means going on an extended hike and having less water, so that you feel what it feels like when it's no longer accessible in a safe way, obviously, right? But whatever that is, whatever that process is for you, bringing yourself back to reality and grounding yourself is critically important to express that gratitude.
Right.
And that gratitude serves additional purpose. It serves the purpose of reminding you why you're happy to be alive and kicking.
Mm-hmm.
Because when things get tough and you start going back into your mind, all the things that you have taken for granted don't count as positive things in your life because they don't really exist. Whereas if you've built this bank account full of stuff that you are grateful for, when adversity hits, you don't want to dump all of this on account of the instant gratification of removing the pain from the event that you are going through right now.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. And wow. Like, I think you and I, we're approaching this like, it's not like I want to die,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to come to the realization that you could, and it's inevitable.
That you will.
That we will. But that brings out so much gratitude for the moment, and it for me, it's like, what do I choose to fear? Like, you can choose to fear like failure or disapproval from others or whatever it may be. But then in front of death, all those things kind of like go aside, so that now when we're approaching life, when we're approaching that every minute, like, there is no risk. Like, I've already won the lottery, you know? And so, yeah, imagine a lot of people getting a healthy dose of appreciation of their time and how that would change. Like, a lot of this bickering and a lot of this, whether this person against this person, or whether you're looking at the finite struggles. If you have that perspective, what that would do to society or the individual, I can only imagine.
Absolutely. Perspective is everything. And when you're looking for perspective, you need to be looking to those that have it worse than you,
Yeah.
or situations that are worse than yours. And this isn't about invalidating your emotions and it's not a very popular word right now. But the reality is this: if you are seeking perspective, seek it where people have it worse.
Right.
So that you can be grateful for what you have, regardless of how bad your situation is. Somebody always has it worse.
Yes. It's probably the majority, especially if you're living in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've already won the lottery.
Yes.
Yeah, compared to a lot of places in the world.
Agreed.
O stands for opportunity. And I feel it's a mindset where you're open to opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And in light of what you just said about time, like, thank you for sharing, this moment with me, having this conversation. But, like, can you share any stories or insight about opportunity? Maybe, something you said yes to, or, what that mindset. For me, if you're open to opportunity, you're willing to go, you're willing to take the call, you're willing to go to the meeting, you're willing to do the interview, for me, everything's opened.
100% it is.
Yeah, how about you?
Oh man, this is the beauty of life. We are free. We are literally free. Like, we are free. Yes, we're not free of commitment.
Yeah.
But the majority of those commitments are self-imposed on account of the decision that we have made.
Yeah.
But we are free to make those decisions.
Sure.
And yes, you may live in some part of the world where freedom has a different connotation. And I'm if that's the case, you're probably not listening to this right now.
Right.
Right? So you have to be grateful and understand, without being ethnocentric, right? Because everybody tends to do that. But the concept of manifestation is very simple. It's not magic. It's neuroscience and psychology.
Sure.
I'll give you an example of this. I'll exemplify this. So imagine you just went through a breakup with somebody, and that person is driving a blue Honda.
Sure.
As far as you're concerned, for the next year and a half, Honda has only put out blue vehicles because you see them everywhere.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, it's a part of the brain that's activated.
It's cognitive bias.
Yeah.
You are looking subconsciously to manifest what it is that you are feeling.
Yes.
And so guess what happens? It happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Honda hasn't put out more blue Hondas, but somehow you feel like they have.
Mm-hmm.
This is where reality and fiction gets blurred.
Right.
And so the same can be said about opportunities. The more you seek them, the more you embrace them, the more opportunities will be created.
Right.
And it will exponentially increase your ability to materialize some of the things that the lofty goals or the lofty goals that you might be either dreaming about or working towards or whatever the case may be. And so seeking varied opportunities is even better.
Right.
Because now you're looking at life and the opportunities through various lenses. And imagine, let's make this correlation. Imagine you're doing a great hike in Iceland and you get to a viewpoint. And for the next 2 hours you look at this. And never ask yourself, are there other viewpoints for this same area?
Yes.
Because if there is, I really want to see what it looks like from all these different angles. Because now you've just optimized your experience. Right? So it's no different with opportunities. Now, with that being said, we need to be aware that we have a limited amount of time.
Sure.
So if you're chasing your tail or you're chasing everything left, right, and center, you're not committing to anything, well, you may have opportunities, but you'll never do anything with them.
Right.
So it's to find that right balance, right? When the opportunities present themselves, how do I optimize? What are some of those opportunities that are feeding right into my purpose, that are feeding into my mission statement? And how can I effectively and efficiently get involved and get something done and really get some enjoyment out of this and the adventure of it and grow? And what do I need to be able to say no to on account of I have a limited amount of time? And so that's just an organic process that needs to happen. And ultimately, the way I do this is I have a mission set. That mission remains unchanged, but the way I get to it will change and vary. So for me, when I'm here wanting to dabble X, Y, and Z, the question is always the same. Does this feed the mission?
Right.
If it doesn't, then I can put it aside for now. Right? And maybe I get back to it later.
During our conversation, I realized something that I didn't realize about the content of the book. It's about being awake and being very in tune and in touch with our feelings, our emotions, and our thoughts. And not following the natural. I think if we turned off our brain, we would all just seek comfort and security and,
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, life is about facing our problems and challenging and finding new solutions to problems. And I don't think this podcast is for everybody. It's for those people that want to make every hour of their life count to the maximum potential that they've been given, whether it's their environment or the natural gifts that they've been bestowed. I want to go into the letter A, which just stands for assessment, which is, I say it all the time, we have a lot in our society, in this time that we live in, we have this lost art of assessment, which is thinking, critical thinking. Like, can you give any nuggets on, like, how does someone develop the skill of assessment? Because you said it just in our podcast. It takes effort and energy to be able to think through problem sets and actually have an opinion on something. I think a part of our society is that they have this narrative based off of fear that's been pumped out through traditional media, and we just kind of accept it as face value. We don't really think about some of the consequences that might arise from just accepting that as a value? Or secondary, what can I do to make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
This lost art of thinking or assessment, what is your take on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that's a massive rabbit hole that we could disappear into for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But I would say the capacity for critical analysis starts with not being attached to an outcome,
Right. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so for me, if we're having an argument right now and I'm having an emotional reaction in reaction to the conversation that we're having,
Sure.
I will take a pause and take a step back and go, why am I reacting? What in this comment, for example, makes me react right now?
Right.
Why am I reacting? And so if the answer is, this person is rude or whatever the case may be, then I have 2 choices. I either disengage completely, which stops the bleeding of negative emotions that are,
Yes.
injecting into my day on account of me having an argument online with somebody that doesn't even matter.
Right.
Or I decide that perhaps I'm reacting because I should be looking into this area of the conversation,
Right.
For myself. And so if you have the ability to do this and you don't let your ego flare up every time somebody challenges you,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a much better life.
Right.
Like you can't. Like if your ego flares up every time somebody criticizes you, you're doomed.
Mm.
You are going nowhere. I can guarantee you that. You're going to get shut down from everything. You're going to shut yourself down. You're going to shut your own opportunities up because your ego will always be in the way. Now, a little bit of ego is good. It helps you perform. It helps you want to do well. It helps you want to, that's not what we were talking about here.
Yeah.
What we are talking about here is debilitating ego. And so, to answer your question, it's always about what attachment do I have to this outcome and why do I have an attachment to this outcome? Is this dogmatic view of the outcome? Therefore, the only reality or the only truth that can be is the way I think about things? Because I can tell you right now, you're 100% wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's a million different ways to do things, to process things that also make sense. It's not just you, okay? So my question is always this. Have you considered switching roles and going the other way around as if you were arguing for whatever point the person is making?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, then it allows me to research what I need to research to make this happen. Right? Like, and when I say research, I don't mean go on Facebook and see what posts this person and that person. But if we're having a critical sort of either science-based or knowledge-based conversation or discourse, then I need to know what I'm talking about. Right? So if we're going to argue leadership and some of the most important principles of leadership, I better know my stuff.
Yeah.
And if I don't know my stuff, I better know where to look to find the answers I'm looking for. But most people are not willing to go to the extent of really learning about the process. What they want to do is to trauma dump on you by spewing their emotions out on a piece of paper or on an email or on a text.
Right.
Or on a social media post. Because that gives them that instant gratification without the work. So we're back to square one again. Let's do as minimal amount of work as possible, and let's cater to this. This is what makes misinformation so dangerous.
Right.
Because misinformation is dangerous in a way that people that are not willing to put in the work,
which is the majority.
The majority of people,
yeah,
will go to a information concierge of sort. And that person will now be providing them with their reality. Mm. And this is how you end up with people sending you, did you see that on this Instagram post? And I follow this account, and the account is all black and white. Like there is no shades of gray.
Yeah.
Everything is bad, everything is wrong, everything is, and then you go to another account and it's a complete opposite. Mm. Right? Whereas in reality, we know that just as is the case in most things in life, the truth is generally somewhere in the middle. Very rarely is it in the two ends of the spectrum, right? And so that's kind of my thoughts on that. It's like, in order for you to understand critical analysis, you either did it through education, where you are forced to do it as a matter of course, because that's how peer-reviewed papers are, written. Academic papers and research papers and those types of things, that's how they're written. Emotions are taken out, and it's like, what do we have?
Sure.
Right? that can help you. But you can do that on your own as well. By acknowledging the emotions that the reaction or that the conversation is having on you, or whatever discourse is having on you, understanding the underlying reasons why it's happening, and trying to see life from the other person's point of view.
Right.
And once you've done all of those things, it's much easier to concede. Now we start talking about strategic communication after that. Right? And that's another skill that needs to be learned. If I concede a little bit of your argument, does that give me a little, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, depends on context. And so it's very complex. It's not super simple.
Yeah.
Because even if you're mastering critical analysis, for you, now you have to be able to effectively communicate this in a way that doesn't make people walls go up.
Sure.
And that's almost impossible to do, because we live in a world of victim. And every time that somebody speaks, the walls are going up.
Right.
You're attacking me.
Yeah.
Instead of, no, critical discourse or reasonable discourse, respectful discourse is critical for the advancement of whatever idea you might have. That's why I enjoy podcasting so much. That's why I enjoy having conversations with great people so much. You have 4 people in a room. You just elevated everybody. If you are willing to engage in critical discourse and really not be so set in your own ways, right? Even if you believe that your way is good, you need to understand that there are many ways to do things.
I think even during our interview, going through our conversation and the content that we're doing, something is forming, which is, one, I think we have to lay aside our ego. And there needs to be a little bit of humility to be able to engage with other people in other ideas, and whether we're just talking about critical thinking and assessment and I think that's so important. And I think that one trait alone divides the people that are willing to grow, willing to engage, willing to solve the problem, not just being a part of the problem, complaining on some sort of emotion that they are feeling. I think this collaboration is amazing. But the last letter is Y, which is yield. And the reason why there's a 2 here for yield has a dual meaning, or 2 meanings. One is to produce a yield. And the second is to submit, to yield to something. And I think both is very important. So for me, my goal every single day is to produce something or ship something very tangible, to show something for my work every single day, which is the first meaning of yield. This is a framework of thinking for every single day, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. This podcast could be something tangible that we've created. What are some of your metrics that you want to do on a daily basis to achieve what you want to achieve? What are some of the metrics, or what are the things that are very, very important to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the exact same way, in that every day has to be a leap forward at the very least. And if it isn't a leap forward, there has to be a very reasonable reason why it hasn't. Because life happens, right?
Sure.
Like things can happen. But ultimately, what have I done today that made me better than yesterday?
Sure.
And I'm talking about, it might be 0.01%, it might be, I don't know, and it's very difficult to quantify. But have I done something today that made me better? Or that contributed to the collective?
Yeah.
Because that's one thing. Once you start taking the focus strictly from you, and you start looking at life in a way where you can bring a ton of value to other people's lives, it creates that sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose is paramount. Because when the going gets tough, you're going to start questioning your why.
Yes.
And if you don't have why, might as well have nothing.
Right.
Right? And so for me, those are some of the key. And I wouldn't describe them as metrics because really they're hard to quantify.
Right.
But it's actions taken. Like today, for example, I had to study. So I woke up early, I did some studying. I had to book some flights. I booked the flights.
Right.
I came here to engage in an awesome conversation. I have a business meeting after this.
Amazing.
And so for me, I set my day in a way that optimizes not only, because there has to be a balance there, not only the things that I have to do, but the continued connection that I seek with while interacting with the world.
Yes.
So for example, you and I are very close.
Yeah.
Like we've gotten very close over the years, and I don't care if a nuclear war started today, I was coming here to have that conversation.
Right.
Right?
Right.
and so that was, for me today, that was the goal.
Right.
And so every day is like that. But you are correct in that you can find yourself in a very comfortable spot very quickly. And even if the spot may be perceived as uncomfortable by other people's standards, if they're comfortable for you, you need to pick up the pace.
You do.
You need to pick up the pace. Like you can't. Because you will slowly creep back into a world of nothingness very quickly, because our natural propensity towards survival is in every single one of us. And the difference between the people that don't give into it and people that give into it is knowledge, application, and commitment.
Right.
That's all. That's the only difference. So it's really interesting how people will often say, "Oh, well, you were in good shape in your life because you love working out."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, do I?" Because I don't feel like I do. Like every day I train until I was nauseous or whatever. I don't feel like I enjoyed myself.
Right.
But the greater purpose was to have the ability to weaponize my fitness to serve the collective. So it was tied right into my why, right into my purpose. So every day I hit the gym in the morning, I pushed myself so that it could never be said from me that I didn't give everything I had to that pursuit, But people will take that away from you and say, no, you just love working out. Right?
That's an outsider looking
Sure
in.
it is.
Right?
Sure it is. So it has to be my own standard. What have I done to upkeep it? What have I done to contribute to the mission statement? And if nothing was done today, there has to be a very valid reason why nothing